This is Guardian Radio, your station for up-to-the-minute news, intelligent, interactive, and engaging conversation. 96.9 FM. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and staff of Guardian Network.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Heather Hunt, and it's a wonderful opportunity to be here again on a Wednesday afternoon, guest hosting the Hit Back. And just love that Catch the Crowd music, get us in a good mood. Although there's a lot of serious things to talk about, you know, we still have to take it all in stride, be thankful that we're here to live another day. And just to borrow those words from Zhivago Lang just a couple of minutes ago, you know, we need to just talk ourselves happy sometimes when things are getting a little heavy in this Commonwealth of the Bahamas. But ladies and gentlemen, we do have a lot to talk about today. And just to put it all into context before I introduce the first guest that I have this afternoon. Yesterday, if you were following the news, you would see that the United Nations report recently released is exclaiming once again that we are under a climate change and that the impacts of climate change on low-lying island nations such as the Bahamas present serious threats to the ability of these islands to support human lives and livelihoods. And this was reported fully in The Guardian and other, of course, media outlets yesterday. And that is the beginning of where I want to start this conversation today. But also, notable persons in the arena of the environment are chiming in on that report. And today, for example, we would have heard from Eric Carey. He is the Bahamas National Trust Director. And he's reported as saying that we need to be talking and thinking and acting on climate change as if our lives depend on it. And that is the question of the day. Are we talking seriously enough about climate change? Are we talking about renewable energy? I know BPL is in the news today, and we're going to talk a little bit about that too. But instead of complaining on the BPL fuel hikes or alleged fuel hikes that we were talking about the past 2 days, what are we actually doing just to shift the entire conversation? Talk about renewable energy. And also, of course, things that affect the environment, such as what Joe Darville described today as a pandemic in the coral reefs. So those are the types of conversations we want to start off with in the first hour, talking about the environment and climate change and renewable energy and things along that line. And I'm pleased to have my guest with me, the most recent Minister of the Environment. We have Honorable Romuald Ferreira. He is an attorney. He is an environmental specialist, environmentalist. And like I said, he would have been the most recent serving Minister of the Environment. And so he would have, with all of his experience and most recent political position, quite a bit to say and to help us guide this conversation. So good afternoon, Romy. How are you? Are you there?
I am here.
Okay.
Hopefully you should be able to hear me at this point.
Okay, I can hear you now. So it's a pleasure having you on this afternoon. Thank you for coming. Before we dive into all of the good stuff that we have on our plate to digest, just tell me a little bit about what you're up to now. Are you adjusting, getting back to your private life, knowing that after September you're no longer in frontline politics? Just, let us know what you're doing these days.
Getting back to work. Obviously, the results are the results. Here we are, and reality set in. But we're back to open. Ferrer and Company is open, and I'm back to work. So moving on is the most important thing, and that's what I've done.
Well, Romy, even before the elections and before you would have been a member of parliament, I know you were the member of parliament for Marathon. You were always a very vocal person and a respected voice on issues of the environment in the country. So speaking up on issues like this was nothing politics and is not now. I particularly remember even in the early days, you were one of the major voices speaking out in reference to that Rubis spill in the Marathon constituency. And I'm sure that would have been one topic that most of those residents remembered you for. So I'm glad to have you here now talking about more current issues. And I want to really dive in on what, firstly, Joe Darville was talking about today. He was on the news and also reported in the paper, talking to us about a pandemic in the coral reefs and how the diseases and the especially in Grand Bahama is going to be an urgent threat to our way of life. Can you just jump right in, maybe give us some context as to what he's speaking about, or any other of the environmental issues that you think are pressing right now?
Sure. First of all, in relation to Mr. Darville's comments, Joe's comments, he's a respected voice, and he's sounding the alarm on an outbreak of stony coral tissue disease. And so the fact, the stony corals, particularly those around Grand Bahama, are being impacted by this disease, and there are implications behind that. So to try and put that in context for the listeners, they have to think about corals as a living animal. I know sometimes it's hard to believe because they don't really move around like what you would expect animals to do. They sit in one place. And so they have vulnerabilities because they sit in one place. And they also provide great benefit to the Bahamian society and human beings and our country in general because of that very fact. They sit in one place and they're made out of stone. And so what's happening is that they're being attacked by a pathogen, and that pathogen is killing them. And so this is a very serious situation. It's being investigated by government officials. They're certainly very much aware of it. But of course, these pathogens happen in nature from time to time. And so what the situation is now is that how much of this is linked to climate change? How much of what we're seeing is a result of the increase in temperature in the oceans and in the atmosphere? So how much of this is a result of human activity on the planet that has generated carbon dioxide and methane, and as a result of generating these gases, the average temperature on the planet is increased. And so that, I think, is the fundamental link between climate change and the comments you see today. And so when you hear the comments, certainly by Mr. Carey, Eric, our friend from the Bahamas National Trust, he's inviting you to consider two different types of existence, really, at its heart. Normally, when we think of climate change in the Bahamas, we think of existence, we think of our jobs being affected by hotel closures, or perhaps our houses. And a lot of that has to do with loss of material possessions and loss of livelihood. But he's taken it even further by inviting you to consider that with a dramatic increase in sea level rise, all of us, may actually have to contemplate evacuating the entire country. And that there is the gravamen of the situation that we face as a nation.
Well, are we taking it with the level of seriousness that it requires? Because if you have notable environmentalists sounding the alarm, and it's not like we have not lived examples. We've had Hurricane Dorian, which is the most powerful storm, basically on record, or in at least most recent history on this side of the world, and we were the direct victims of that hurricane. And of course, now we see, like you would have been discussing, the coral reef and other examples of what the effects of climate change are in the country. So are we really taking this subject with the gravity that it deserves?
I think that everything progresses in stages. I think we've made steps, certainly for some activists, not as much steps as they would like to see, but certainly in the administration that I was a part of, we enacted very important laws that will come to bear in relation to this. And I can point out three of them would be the Environmental Planning and Protection Act, which establishes certain fundamental rules and regulations about how we conduct ourselves, how industry conducts itself, but more importantly, penalties and how they affect. Because bear in mind, the way you control climate change is through emissions, and you do that through behavior. So that was a very important step. And then to control development, we phased in the environmental impact assessment regulations. So all of these are tied to our response to climate change. It's really looking at development and trying to come up with development with the lowest possible carbon footprint. I mean, that is the key. And to do that by creating the legislative framework to enable that. And this is the premise by which we operated. So we were able to legislate 10 pieces of environmental legislation and, of course, declare 43 marine protected areas. But the reason for that was to create overlapping layers of environmental protection as a part of our response to climate change. So the fact of the matter is we will never finish responding to climate change. As long as there's a Bahamas, we're going to be in response mode, because the conditions which led to climate change will not abate immediately after we abate the behaviors that are causing our planet to warm. There'll be a lag time. So we're going to be on this alert for some time. And this is why we passed the plastic ban, because we were saying at the time, we have a moral imperative to reduce our carbon footprint, bearing in mind that if we don't recycle, or the use of plastics and this kind of stuff, plastics come from the petroleum industry. So it's really about controlling our petroleum consumption. And then on the global stage, we had to consider the fact that the Bahamas doesn't really emit that much carbon dioxide compared to the big players, and how you can leverage that for funding. So there's a dualism going on, both at the local stage and both at the higher stage. Progress is slow, but I think we're moving in the right direction.
Okay, those statements that you made, you were referencing reducing our carbon footprint. As individual members of society, is that something that we can do? Are there things that we can do as individuals and not necessarily wait for the government to give instructions or lead the charge, just to make sure that we're doing our own part in our own way? What ideas would you give to individuals who just, feeling very passionately about it and just want to do something?
Well, I mean, the various levels of action people can take, and that has a great deal to do with the passion by which they're motivated. You have on the high end people that are very passionate about environmental matters and really want to get involved, and they tend to be on the activist end. And you'd find that joining an NGO, a local environmental group, there are lots of them. We talked about the Bahamas National Trust, but there are many, many of them. And supporting these activities. So you have it at that level. You can support this concept of a responsible and green Bahamas financially. And it doesn't have to be a much, but it could be a lot. And you have it at that level. And you have a sort of volunteerism, beach cleanups, and that sort of thing. All of these little things count as we move forward as a collective. And then, of course, in addition to all of that, you have the kinds of, you have the people that decide that they want to get involved politically. And so you have many different levels of involvement. And so there are many different spheres in which people can volunteer their time and act towards this. And then you have your own personal choices that you make as a consumer, certainly in our society. And that would be being aware of your consumption, being aware of your wastage, being aware of wasting water, wasting energy, bearing in mind the cost of electricity.
Well, I do really want to get deeper into that train of thought that you just started. Before we go there, I just want to invite persons who want to join. It's open today. You can give us a telephone call, 323-6232, 325-4316, or 325-4259. Or you can send us a text at 422-4796. 422-4796. So speaking of text, let me go to the text line. Great show as usual. Ask your guests why the government doesn't charge larger fines for littering, because there is enough garbage in New Providence to run a renewable energy plant for a number of years. Any comment on that? I think, waste to energy is a whole topic within itself. And I do want to say, and I recall that one of the early things that would have been done under your administration is the revamp of that New Providence landfill. So I think you would have done an excellent job in that regard, because we remember the fires and the lament of persons in that neighborhood with respect to the New Providence landfill prior to you being the Minister of Environment. But what do you say about waste to energy? How real and viable is that in the Bahamas? And have we done enough? Should we be looking at it a little more closely? What are your views there?
Well, certainly, your call is correct. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. That text write-up it's funny in a sense, but certainly there are litter laws and the fines are lower. But that was the whole purpose behind passing the Environmental Planning and Protection Act and passing the Ministry of Environment Act. Because up until that point, the maximum penalty for fines on the environmental scale would have been in the order of $5,000. And so that would have amounted to the cost of doing business. But with the legislative landscape that was put in place, that rises to as much as $35 million. And so there you have a substantive increase in the amount, and you have the matters being Supreme Court matters, as opposed to magisterial matters, which attract, as you're aware, the $5,000 or the much, much lower fine. And so, when I left office, I left draft at increasing those fines substantially and dramatically, and even considering even more draconian concepts as we move forward to express ourselves, sort of in a cleaner Bahamas. So certainly that's in place. But on the topic of waste to energy, I think the broader conversation for us, certainly in relation to energy and the whole subject of renewable energy, would be how do we use these sort of get rid of fossil fuels and turn ourselves more onto the solar end of things. And I think certainly strides have been made in that part, but one of the big factors that we have to appreciate is that the operations of BPL, they're operating with a system that's with older engines, older types of fuel, historical debt. So they have their constraints. And then when you're talking about renewable energy, you're talking about a situation where that's more modern, more high tech, certainly more decentralized. So in a way, you have like a thesis and antithesis. You have the old way of doing things versus the modern way of doing things. And where we are now, synthesize what we have with what we want to take it to, given our financial constraints.
Well, I'm going to get right back to you on that same point, where we are and where we want to be on this subject, just on the other side of this commercial break. I'm going to take that first commercial break, and we'll be right back with former Minister Romuald Ferreira talking about environmental issues today on the Hit Back. Be right back.
I was a deep sea diver, and when I want to pass, I would match the gas. I was a taxi driver.
This traffic report is brought to you by Shield Insurance and Prudential Loss Adjusters.
First look at traffic this afternoon, and while there's a minor slow at the exit of Gladstone Road getting up there, JFK, the roundabout at Samalapala Highway and Tony's Way is stacked on every side. You've got the traditional heavy line of traffic that comes in on the single lane from JFK. On the other dual lanes of traffic, they're already stacked in the bumper-to-bumper ride getting to the roundabout there. And that intersection, west lane from Tony's Way and Darling, backed up more than 20-odd yards with stop-and-go traffic before it can move on from that point. The traffic along West Bay Street already started in the slow ride from as early as towards Fort Charlotte, prepare for a slow ride that doesn't get any better until you get past the roundabout there at Sanders Beach. Further into the south, the intersection of Carmichael Road and Blue Hill Road is quite busy, but you will get through there. It's not that challenging. Just slows your ride down a bit. And that same after-school look is available now on Soldier Road, especially in the Kensington Garden, Abundant Life, and Old Trail area. This early, we can see slow traffic on both Blue Hill Road South and East Street South coming off the Robinson Road intersection, while the traffic is moving ahead into the roundabouts. The circle on East Street is being slowed down at the Independence Highway East lane to getting in there, and also what's coming off the hill at East West Highway, also wanting to get onto that East Street intersection. This early, the ride is slowed down on Prince Charles Drive, especially getting to the Beatrice Drive and Seabreeze Estate intersection, but also as you move closer to Soldier Road. From there right into the Marathon Road intersection, you can expect a slow bumper-to-bumper ride to get through the traffic lights. Already occurring at the Wolf Village, Vernon, and Soldier Road traffic light. This National Traffic Report, service of J.S. Johnson online.com site, where you're able to sign up today for our online service center app, review your policy details, check outstanding balances, and report a claim. With around the sky like a traffic in real time, I'm VAAA.
Michael was in a horrible car accident. Prudential loss adjusters managed his claim and got him the settlement he deserved. Sierra's roof received hurricane damage. Thanks to Prudential, she and her kids are happy with their claim settlement. Tammy fractured her ankle in a slip and fall. Prudential saved her time, money, and peace of mind. Prudential loss adjusters are here for you whenever a tragedy strikes. Call 322-4026 now.
Don't wait for disaster to strike. This hurricane season, be ready. Protect your home with an affordable and comprehensive home insurance policy from Shield Insurance. You can't control what nature blows your way, but with Shield Insurance, you can rest easy as your largest and most valuable investment. Don't take a chance. Put your home in our hands.
Shield Insurance agents and brokers in Nassau. Call 356-7202 or Freeport 352-5945.
Boy, why you look so mashed up like clothes at the washer?
No, boy, just a hard day. What?
Hard day? What happened? The breakfast lady ran out of tuna and gritty.
We need to start joking with everything, you know. This serious, boy. This real serious, boy.
Boy, what's serious? Tell me.
All right, well, today, boss gave us, boy, one big contract. And nobody else get a chance and nobody say nothing.
Boy, you know that ain't right. You know government contracts ain't supposed to go that way.
Yeah, but nobody's saying nothing. Boss man just tell people to sign the papers. Then he send me to meet his boy downtown and collect this envelope.
You need to tell somebody. You need to become a whistleblower.
You know I's a real man, but I never blow no whistle. I be drunk all my life and junk, you know.
No way. A whistleblower is someone who tells people what they see when they see something wrong happening at work.
But I ain't no whistleblower, and I ain't no snitch. I still white there, you know.
But ain't nobody can know it's you. All you gotta do is call Crime Stoppers, or you could text them from inside the Crack Crime Bahamas app. They don't ask about you. And your call goes straight through to Miami, so nobody know you is. And if you text, your message get mixed up like Kong Salad.
Call 328-8477 from Nassau or 2477 from the Family Islands.
Throughout our lifetime, we must all make decisions. No matter how we choose, the right one just needs to be made. Like having J.S. Johnson Insurance Agents and Brokers as your insurance partner. We've been serving the Bahamas for over 100 years. Whether you need home, motor, marine, or commercial insurance, make the right decision. Call 397-2100 or visit jsjohnson.com.
J.S. Johnson Insurance. Peace of mind.
This is Guardian Radio, 96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day.
Oh, yeah. All right. My beautiful islands. I tell you, if the good Lord never goes on holiday, tell me why he made the Bahamas.
Good afternoon. My name is Heather Hunt. I'm here as your guest host again, this one of the Hit Back. And joining me is former Minister of the Environment and Housing, Romuald Ferreira. And we're here discussing environmental issues, climate change, and all of these issues that are topical in the news today. And I guess they should be always. But these last few days, we've been doing a lot of talking about climate change, and now today about BPL and fuel. And before the break, we were just getting ready to discuss renewable energy. So I think that's the place we're going to jump right in. And the point you were making before the break was that we find ourselves right in the middle of a road, I guess, as to where we go from here. I know that, especially under the former administration, but even administrations before that, governments have been paying attention to renewable energy, encouraging renewable energy. I know that even right now, persons who have solar power and are actually advocates for renewable energy and solar power are actually able to even push back or sell the excess energy that they generate back into the power grid. So, Romy, can you tell us, I guess, what are your views on where we are with renewable energy? Are we educating enough? Are we advocating enough? Do people just know what it is that they need to be doing in this area?
Energy is. Before we say that, a big thing to recognize is that as a country, we sit right on the Tropic of Cancer. And so we have some of the best sunlight intensities on the planet in terms of the potential to generate renewable energy from solar per square foot of ground. And that is a direct result of our position on the planet and us being near the Tropic of Cancer. And so that potential, that's a very, very real potential. The situation is that we're an archipelago, and everybody knows that. 30 plus islands are inhabited, and each island sort of generational challenges. And so the strategy has always been an integrated kind of strategy. For instance, in New Providence, if you wanted to deal with solar, you're going to be challenged by land availability in the sense that for every 6 acres produces 1 megawatt or thereabouts. So you're talking about, in order to hit that, in order to satisfy the proper generational requirements for the customer base in New Providence, you need a tremendous amount of land. So the solution to something like that in New Providence would be an integrated system, as you mentioned, where consumers can now become potential suppliers to the grid of energy. And that's beginning to take shape. But in order to have that, and have it at the kind of level where it makes a substantive difference in the price of fuel, then you need to get rid of the barriers to it. You need as great a market penetration as possible. And that's done by lowering taxes, and that's happening, and obviously by access to capital. But the infrastructure by the power company itself to accommodate that. And that's just a New Providence setting. In a family island setting, where you have large sections, take an island like Mayaguana, it paints a beautiful picture. There's Abrams Bay, Pirates Well, and Betsy Bay, 3 settlements on an island a little bit longer than New Providence. But you're running transmission lines and distribution lines and maintaining them. Or take Eleuthera. You're running that for 110 miles or more. And so challenges like that and challenges for cost infrastructure are overcome by what they call distributed generation, where you just produce the energy you need at the site. So there are certainly options out there as it relates to technology. But one of the things I was really focused on when in office was reducing the government's bill, because certainly the government is one of the biggest users and sort of debtors to the power company in that sense of energy. And so the putting in renewable energy in public buildings is a critical part of our climate change response, certainly when I was in office, and I would suspect is going to be for a very long time. So what you saw was the installation of 1 megawatt of renewable energy at the Thomas A. Robinson Stadium. And that right there represents the start. That was the biggest of its kind in the Caribbean, with the solar car park and just the size of its contribution. And that feeds energy back into the grid and provides it to the local school there. Also, we had what we did at Anatole Rogers. And so that was putting in solar infrastructure and changing the water system in the school so that it could be more climate change smart and climate change ready. And these are the part of the adaptations that tie climate change into our behavioral response in the face of climate change and in the face of costs of energy. So in order to tackle sort of all 3 of these areas, we need to kind of change our behavior, have the right kind of legislation, but also the technology, the proper and appropriate use of the right kind of technology.
I think so. We just need to, I want to hop right on that change of behavior. But before I get right there, we do have a caller. I want to take that call, producer. Good afternoon. You're on the Hit Back.
Yes, good afternoon, Ms. Hunt, and good afternoon to your guests.
Good afternoon.
I've been following your shows, and they've been really very, very good.
Thank you.
Today is an excellent show, and I'd like to congratulate former Minister Ferreira on the great job that him and his ministry did in, quenching the dump fires, because that was really such a big problem, because I live not too far away, and it was awful. And also the poignant smell of the dump as well, and the more regular collection of garbage as well. All of that, to me, happened, and it was really, really. But, I always had the question of why in the Bahamas that we don't use, I would go in the food stores in the States before, and they used to have a place where you could drop off plastic bags. They would have a place where you could drop off aluminum cans. There's a place where you can drop off, bottles. Why are we here? Why don't we do it? Is it too costly, or just that, no one has bothered to do it, or what? I'd like to hear, his comment on that.
Thank you so very much.
Recycling, because really we do nothing here in the country to recycle, and all you see is, out on the main roads and all about people throwing their beer bottles, their cans, their Kentucky boxes and Popeye boxes, etc., because we are very untidy people now. We're really doing very bad in that area. I don't know what's going to happen. In my opinion, they need to have these people go out there in some big red and orange suits and pick this litter up and charge them with heavy fines, and so we can stop littering, because it's really a poor reflection on us as a people.
Thank you so very much for that comment, caller. Minister, what do you say about recycling? Are we doing what we need to do to encourage a culture of recycling? What were your findings during your time?
I believe we're in the best position that we've ever been to achieve that, because you can never talk effectively about recycling unless you sort of control your waste, and then you sort of manage how you receive your waste. And we were able to do that at the New Providence Sanitary Landfill in partnership with Ecology Park. And let's remember that this is a Bahamian group. In the management practices at the landfill, you make it better able to receive streamlined waste. And that is the first step. And anyone that goes to the landfill now, your interaction with the landfill is like night and day from what it was before. And you now have the opportunity to do, at least at the bare minimum, the basic sorting of waste. And this is how it begins. It begins with the sorting. And most Bahamians don't sort when they're throwing their waste out. They put everything in the same garbage. We haven't acquired that discipline yet. But certainly at the back end, at the landfill, that is where the sorting is going to occur. And you see the rudimentary steps of that starting to happen right now. But you could have never even gotten to that step in any kind of feasible way or any kind of realistic way or rational way, only unless you had sort of re-engineered and retooled the landfill. So the rudimentary and the foundation and the beginning of the edifice is there. And now what the goal would be is to look at the waste stream, look at the volumes, and see how that could be capitalized or see how that can be retooled or somehow repurposed to enter back into the local economy. And I think that is the stage that they're moving towards there at Ecology Park.
Well, I think that ties right into the point that you were making a little bit earlier, talking about behavior modification, when we're thinking about climate change, because it's not just legislation, it's not coming always from the top down, but we as citizens can modify our behavior and make up our minds that we will actually begin to segregate and do it at home. Because how difficult would it really then be, in your view, for the Minister of Environment or the Department of Environmental Health, if there is a groundswell and an acceptance of a new culture of sorting waste at the point of the home instead of waiting until you get onto the ecology park? How difficult or even cost effective would it be, you think, an exercise for the government to take that on if they get the buy-in from citizens to start that sorting at home? Do you think it's even feasible?
feasible, but the challenges would be that the places where that sort of thing is done, the people pay for waste collection. In the Bahamas, the government provides that for you for free. That's the big difference right there. And so what do I mean? So take for example in Florida, you ride around in the neighborhoods, you don't see any trash cans out by the side of the street. That's because they're all in the garage. Right. On a particular day, they bring them out. And when that's done, they put them back in. If it's not out, or if it's improper in any way, the city levies a fine against you. So what you have is a very textualized level of encouraging behavior by virtue of fines and essentially discipline. And that was done. But in a Bahamian setting, your garbage is out by the front of your yard. You don't pull that out. There's no financial burden on you to have it collected, but yet there's a tremendous cost to have it collected, because when I was in office, I increased collection from once a week to twice a week. And there were tremendous cost implications with that, but it had to be done to control the rodent population. But that being said, you don't think about stuff like that. So what we have, like I said, going back to that, is the basic foundation upon which to build with. I believe as we develop local government, though, that's when you'll see a much more robust environmental regime come about, because really and truly, officers of the Royal Bahamas Police Force shouldn't be involved with, you throwing your litter out or double parking or having derelict vehicles in your yard or not sorting your waste properly at your house. I mean, you should have a robust local government, and that's a source for that particular authority or a source for that particular local government entity, because one of the biggest challenges for local government is funding, and one of the biggest challenges for environment historically has always been inadequate environmental law, which meant inadequate penalties. And a big part of that is we want to increase the layers of protection. And by introducing environmental monitoring, environmental enforcement to local government at that level, which would have really done is increase the layer. And I believe that that's certainly the way forward in this debate.
Maybe the way forward too is figuring out how to make persons make some contribution for their garbage collection. A thing to say, but I could tell you, during my time living in Grand Bahama, people always comment on how clean the place is and the difference, the low tolerance for garbage and dirt on the island. And in my mind, and as I assessed it, I think it had to do with, or in my view, it partially has to do with the fact that they have to pay for sanitation services, or at least to some degree within the Freeport area. So I think if we're really going to be serious about, environmental issues, climate change, doing our part to change behavior, I think this may be one of the areas where buy-in is necessary and actually putting your money where your mouth is, because if at the end of the day, we need to, as communities, subsidize a regime where they are collecting aluminum cans on one day, paper on another day, or whatever, have specialist equipment that can actually sort on site, or whatever have you. I think that is something that will cost money, but as responsible citizens, knowing that upon us and the earth and our country is crying out for us to stand up and be better citizens. I think we have to make a serious decision whether or not we're going to contribute to that.
The thing is that all of this affects our ability to attract funding and support for climate change resilience. And all climate change resilience means, and infrastructure, is putting in things in place to protect our country physically from rising sea level and sort of increasing temperatures. But I think what I would invite your listeners to consider at this point is that the Bahamas emerged out of the sea about 200,000 years ago. So we were under the ocean before. So this state of affairs, this plateau that's on the Bahama Banks in the North Atlantic Ocean, was once all underwater. And I think most Bahamians never stop to consider or even give that a second thought. And they just take for granted that you're walking on the surface in New Providence or Eleuthera or Andros or Crooked Island or wherever you're walking, throughout the length and breadth of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Even if you were on Gomo Hill Island, Mount Alvernia, even you there, the highest point in our country, that was once underwater. So when people talk about climate change, don't think it's an impossibility that this entire country can be underwater, because it has been underwater before, and it being underwater will essentially be it being submerged again. So these things have happened before in the past, and the likelihood and the risk of them happening again in the future is actually very real. And so we bear the brunt of the industrialized world and their quest and their love for oil. And that has its beginning in Winston Churchill and World War II when they switched from coal to oil. But that's another discussion. But the point I'm making is actually very simple.
Well,
we have a responsibility.
Go ahead.
And so we have to make that point.
I'm going to get to this love of oil because, the hot topic of the day is BPL and fuel prices and are they going up and, everything that's going on in the world. But before we get there, just let me read a few of these texts. Kudos to the minister and everything he accomplished during his tenure. The dump was a national disgrace. All the best in your future endeavors. Ms. Hunt, people in Nassau are a little touchy about comparing us to Freeport. Well, I didn't mean anything by it except to say that, one place there garbage collection is free and in the other there is some contribution. So I just wondered whether that makes any difference in the whole discussion. I think when you pay for something, you get what you pay for. But I don't mean anything too much by that. Okay, question for the former minister. I lost the text. Only got to be able to work the text and work the phone line at the same time. Okay, here we go. Great show as usual. Ask your guest if he thinks that people in the Bahamas actually take climate change seriously. Because in my opinion, people don't. People have the attitude that we will lose land within the next 100 years or less. And that's so far away that they wouldn't be alive anyway. So how could the government change people's mindsets? What do you think about that? An interesting comment. In other words, it's not my problem. I'm 40 years old or 50 years old. I'm not going to be here for another 50 years. So leave that for my grandchildren or my great-great-grandchildren. It's not a topic, but I think it's an urgent topic. And if you listen to Mr. Carey this morning, he says our lives depend on it. So I don't think he's talking about our lives 50 years from now. We're talking about it today.
Certainly. The thing is how do you teach people to care? How do you give somebody a care ethic? How do you make somebody kind of reach outside the individual that they are and like something beyond themselves and care for something bigger than themselves? I think it's important for Bahamians to remember that you actually can't express your freedom without involving others and without respecting others and without living in harmony with others. And it's also important to recognize that you need a place to express that freedom in as a Bahamian. And that place is our country, the Bahamas. And when you look at it, we're on average about 5 feet above sea level. That's 5 feet. We have a reasonable goal at stake, which is we want to make sure that the temperatures of the ocean don't go increase above 2 degrees centigrade. Even that goal, 2 degrees centigrade, is too high. The scientists have come back and said that it should be closer to 1.5 degrees centigrade. And what does all that mean? It's hard when you're teaching people to care and then you start quoting numbers, because I was about to quote that the sun heats up the ocean and all that infrared energy and it makes the storms more intense. But when you describe it in terms like that, sometimes it's hard for people to empathize. But when you visit an African Dorian, as unfortunately I had the opportunity to visit the strongest hurricane on record, certainly in the Atlantic, and when you see the destruction, certainly of the private property in the homes and the boats sitting on top of buildings, and then when you see the destruction wrought in the lives of the people and the hurt in their eyes and the fear, it becomes very real. Suddenly climate change and suddenly all of those numbers about how hot the earth is getting, the 2 degrees centigrade, all of that distills into one simple thing, that it affects human lives, and the human lives is taken in the broader picture. Our country's at stake.
Our country is at stake, and you would hear our prime minister even most recently going to COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland, obviously giving a stirring appeal to the world, letting everyone around the world know, but also reminding us here in the Bahamas that we may not be the we don't bear the full responsibility of the carbon footprint or of the causes of climate change. But as Dorian would have shown, we are clearly one of the countries who are actually being the victims of climate change. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to come back after the news. We're going to pick up this conversation because I do want to get to BPL and the fuel and relying on these traditional oil, like you call it, the love of oil. Former Minister Ferreira, if you can just stay on that line until after the news. We'll be back right after the news.
Then we will end up to the star, Austin Grant's place. Party till the morning light, and that's no lie. Sweet home, Grand Bahama, I'm coming home to you. Sweet home, Grand Bahama, nowhere else will ever do. Come cracking practice in September. Them boys of East could crack a conch. We took that long drive in October, I remember. Friends cracking joke and getting drunk. Christmas time was the best time. Sticking magazine on the walls. Bringing sign for the front yard. Pine cones with our Christmas balls. Sweet
This is Guardian Radio, 96.9 FM, Nassau, Bahamas.
You may fly or take a cruise. I'll take you to Nassau, the capital. Watch a Junkanoo festival. Then to Gad Island, eat flour cake. Watch quadrille dancing to the rake and scrape. Ooh. My Bahamas, the place to be. Through the islands and the keys. Soothing Bahamian breeze.
Good afternoon. This is Heather Hunt, and I'm here on this wonderful Wednesday on the Hit Back. We're talking with former Minister of Environment, Romy Ferreira. We're talking about environmental issues. We do have our second segment coming up. We, having another subject in the second hour. But I do want to just wrap this conversation up with former Minister Ferreira, conversation about matters relating to the environment. And I don't think we can let you go without commenting on the topic of the day, which is the BPL fuel hike. And you ended in the last segment talking about what people used to describe as the love of oil, and referencing it to England and back in the day when we switched from coal to oil as the main source of energy. Do you see right now that we're going to have to abandon that, or it's going to become cost prohibitive, relying on this fossil fuel for electricity? Minister, should we be seriously looking at doing something different? Or is it just, scare tactics and we're stuck with gas and fuel for life?
I don't think we're going to be stuck with it for life. Certainly the role it plays in its central dominance will be diminished. I mean, you can see the writing on the wall. Certainly in my lifetime, just the penetration of renewables into the mainstream has increased tremendously. And strategically, you would probably never sort of get away with getting rid of oil and gas completely. But what you can see, certainly by the Gulf War and by these current affairs that are going on right now, is that this is a valuable commodity globally, oil and gas, and its prices fluctuate. And obviously it's non-renewable. Whereas opposed to the sun, even though we say the sun is sort of renewable, our sun is a 4 billion-year-old star. And at the end of 8 billion years will be no more. So even in that sense, that's non-renewable. But I take the point. in terms of renewable energy, that is certainly the best way to go. And when you talk about BPL and they're always going to be challenged, as we hinted before, by the cost of fuel. I think that is a huge, huge factor. And as it stands now, with the uncertainty in the world, and certainly as regards to the cost of fuel, you're going to see some fluctuations in prices, and it's already being called for. You can expect the price at the gas pump to increase to as much as $9-10 a gallon for fuel. So that's going to have some serious implications. And anytime that happens, that reminds you of dependence on fossil fuels. But let me say this, and I think I would like to say this. The successive Bahamian governments have always valued, climate and the environment and our response to it. And I did a little research on this, and you can illustrate it by the fact that when we look at the history of our country, the history of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, environment has always been sort of front and center. From the time of the Lutheran adventurers, when they felled trees in Eleuthera and sent them to their fellow Puritans in Boston, that was the environment that they were relying on. And from the time we had a parliament, and there were even no political parties, and they decided that they would enact the Land and Sea Park on the north side of Athol Island. I mean, that was historic. That was in the 1890s, 1894, I believe, or somewhere around there. I mean, that was a historic event. Everybody agreed, because you would have had a parliament that was essentially composed of independent agents, no parties, expressing the will of the people at that time. And they decided to enact that park. And then you would have even had the United Bahamian Party, the UBP, which gets scapegoated a lot. That was created under their tenure. Then you'd have had the Pinland administration, and they have been sort of victimized in some ways, but certainly on the environmental performance, you had the Environmental Health Services Act, but you had the ratification of the Rio Declaration, right? And then you had the administration, the Ingram administration, and those years, because you had 15 years of it, and you would have had the creation of the Best Commission. You'd have had environmental inroads constantly being made, constantly by successive administrations. And then you had the sign-in on to climate change and climate change control, culminating in the Christie administration signing on to the Paris Agreement to control emissions. So you see, you've had successive governments responding to this climate change initiative. And then you had the Minister administration, of which I served proudly, and I'm very grateful, where we executed the environmental laws for the country in the Bahamas and fixing the dump, and also which is stopping the pollution from oozing into the ocean at Clifton Pier, which people don't talk about much, but certainly made a huge difference. So you see this continued commitment. And then we see it again with Prime Minister Davis, and he's reiterating the commitment, but he's actually following in a long tradition and maintaining a firm, I think, position of the governments, of successive governments of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, that our environment is important to us. We want to move in the direction of sustainability. And I certainly congratulate him for his remarks. And I listened very keenly to them. But what you see is a successive governments committing to this idea that we can only express our collective selves on the national stage and on the international stage if we maintain and protect our environment.
I was indeed very proud of the way the Prime Minister represented the Bahamas at the COP26. And of course, even since then, his public stance on climate change and all of these issues in relation to the environment. And particularly, I was glad to see through the Minister of Works the retraction of that announcement that the BPL fuel rate increase, because Lord knows, we don't need, just like the Prime Minister said today, anything else to be placed on the backs of Bahamians at this time. So we do wish the government well on this journey. Like you said, it is a topic of conversation that will be with us for a long time. It's not a one-day thing, a focus, but climate change is actually a very huge and broad topic that we have to keep in the forefront of our minds at all times. So I'd like to thank you for coming in to discuss that topic with me today. And before I move on to the second segment, I wouldn't have you here without bringing up a little bit of politics and leadership, because we are segueing into the second subject.
I was waiting on it.
Yo, you were waiting on it.
Waiting on it.
So, we have another guest in studio coming to speak to us about leadership, in general. But before we move into that second segment, today in the National Review, the topic of conversation is a new leaf shaping the post-Minutes F&M. So I just want to ask you briefly, what do you think about the new leaf, which is a wonderful, I think, title, seeing that we've been enjoying a new day since September the 16th. But what is your view about the newly elected and minted leadership of the Free National Movement?
My view is that what's happening now, right before our eyes, is a generational shift. What do I mean when I say that? And just give me a couple of seconds to explain. What's happening now is really a true generational shift. The Bahamas has never had a prime minister that belonged to Generation X or earlier. So it's not X, not Y, not NY, not millennial, never. What we've had is successive baby boomer prime ministers. From Pinland to Mr. Christie, to Mr. Ingram, and to Dr. Minnis. Now we have poised and in position somebody who comes from the baby, not from the baby boomer generation, but is actually a Generation Xer. It's a true generational shift. And for as great as the Prime Minister Davis can ever possibly be, he can never be a Generation Xer because he's a baby boomer. And he belongs to the generation that he belongs to. And so what is significant is that the leadership shift that you see in front of you and in front of the entire Commonwealth of the Bahamas on display represents a move away from this country, finally, from the leadership of the baby boomers to the leadership of the Generation Xers. And this is a very, very significant milestone. And when you look in the Progressive Liberal Party, you see it there. It's like right underneath the surface, beneath the current leadership. Even the rubric of that is there, but it's not being expressed yet because the current prime minister. So I think that is the most significant thing. And to put that in real terms, that means then that the leadership looks more like the majority of the population in terms of age, thinks more like the majority of the population. And I'm talking about, when we're talking about Michael Pintard, Shannon Cartwright, Dwayne Sands, and many of the other leaderships, Lincoln Deal, Don Sanders, many of the other leaders within the structure of the party, they belong to a different generation. And the only way we can progress our country forward to this ideal where we make our mark both locally and internationally is when we bring new ideas to the table. And certainly as far as I'm concerned, it's time for that generational shift. It's time to see leadership that's more representative of the age and demographic, but more importantly, the ideas. It's the ideas that each generation brings that takes us all to this successive step to the goal being realized of an actualized Bahamaland and with its citizens with equal and opportunities to hope, dream, and achieve.
Well, Romy, that was well said. I couldn't say it any better myself, and I want to thank you for taking the time out to join me this afternoon on the Hit Back. Be back so that we can keep talking about these things, these issues of environment and climate change. Make sure that people in the Bahamas keep it front of mind at all times, that this is not a question and an issue for tomorrow or for 50 years down the line. These are decisions and behavior changes that we need to make right now to ensure that our children and our grandchildren get to enjoy the Bahamas that we know and love. So I'm going to take a commercial break, but when we get back, I'm going to have a new guest in studio, and we're going to take a little shift in this conversation, talking about leadership with Gadville McDonald, former executive director of the National Training Agency, and we'll be back right after these few messages.
I'll tell you, you don't have to travel far. 'Cause them rake and scrape boys will
believe in relationship banking. We take pride in getting to know our clients. You have access to knowledgeable, approachable ambassadors and financial coaches so that we can recommend the best product for you. At Fidelity, we care about you. From your financial health to your physical health, we can relate to you because we're just like you. Come and start your relationship banking experience with us today. Visit us online at fidelitygroup.com. Visit any of our branches in Nassau or Grand Bahama, or phone 356-7764 in Nassau or 352-6676 for Freeport.
When I had got prostate cancer, my family at Cancer Treatment Centers of America, within days, I got an appointment. They presented me with treatment options, and we set up a robotic prostatectomy. When my scans came back, there are no signs of cancer. They don't see you as a number, they see you as a part of the family. I'm going on with my life. That's a real gift.
Call us at Cancer Treatment Centers of America.
Drive happy with free fuel for a year with CIBC First Caribbean and Esso. Use your CIBC First Caribbean Visa debit or credit card to fuel up with $25 or over at any participating Esso service station, and you are automatically entered for a chance to win the grand prize and weekly prizes of $200 in fuel or cash. Offer runs until March 20th, 2022. Terms and conditions apply. Visit CIBCFCIB.com for more details. The Esso brand is a trademark of the ExxonMobil Corporation and is used under license.
This is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day.
You could do this. Let's do this. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Trendsetters and leaders. Smurf, yep. We gotta be trendsetters of the world. Every man, every woman, every boy, every girl, rise up and take a stand. Represent your line, every boy, every girl, every man, trendsetters of the world. Leaders of the world, every man, every girl, rise up and take a stand. Represent your line, every woman, every boy,
Every boy, every girl, every man, every woman, every boy, every girl. You know, we need the trendsetters in this country to be in training, to be preparing for the day that they come and take their rightful Bahamas. Not just political leadership, because, you know, people always seem to think that when we're talking about leaders, but, you know, in your home, you are in a leadership role. And at church, you're in a leadership role. On your job, you're in a leadership role. As citizens of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, we are all in some type of leadership role. And I thought it very important to just take a few minutes to discuss the broad topic of leadership. And with me today is the former executive director of the National Training Agency. He's also the pastor of Life Empowerment Church. He is a businessman, and I have specifically invited him here in his capacity as the country leader of the Global Leadership Summit. And this is Mr. Gadville MacDonald, who we have in studio. It's a pleasure to have you here, sir. And we want to talk a little bit about the Global Leadership Summit. What is it? I know it's an organization that's been around all around the world now for over 20 years. And I know you're celebrating about 8 years here in the Bahamas. So let the listeners know exactly what is the Global Leadership Summit and why is it important for us to have that here in the Bahamas?
Well, you know, at the center, Heather, of the Global Leadership Summit is this idea that everyone wins when a leader gets better. I want to say that again. Everyone wins when a leader gets better. And with that particular theme and focus, the Global Leadership Summit is in 123 countries around the world. We train some 421,000 leaders every year. In other words, and so that excites me, that we have leaders around the world, that they are at the table every year training, developing, and improving themselves as leaders. And so that is what we do. We believe that the Global Leadership Summit is all about the learning, and all of us ought to be engaging. And so we put some of the best leaders every year on stage, and so that our people around the world can benefit from the content and from the discussion on leadership. And not only do we just talk about leadership, but what we do is we facilitate and contextualize the conversation to local contexts.
Okay, and how long have you actually been an active participant? I mean, I know you're going on how many years now as country lead in the Bahamas, and then generally, how did you get involved, and how has it made a difference in your life as a leader in your own right?
Well, I was actually responsible for the Global Leadership Summit coming in the Bahamas, simply because I recognized that there was a gap in leadership. People talk about leadership, but you leader when you are constantly in the process of learning, being a part of the leadership discussion, being a part of the leadership experiment, and actually leading out at the same time. And so there's a combination. And so I realized that that we needed to create a safe space for leaders, emerging leaders, and even younger people to come and to learn. And so we engaged the Global Leadership Summit worldwide, and they agreed. And we brought the Global Leadership Summit in, and it's been uphill from then. We have trained every year. We train over 500 leaders in the Bahamas. As a matter of fact, some 200 students attend the Global Leadership Summit every year. As well, and so we make scholarship available to those 200 students, as well as an additional emerging leaders, so that at the end of the day, we would always have people who are growing and becoming. One of the greatest story happened to me was about 3 years ago, when a graduating student, a young lady from Anatole Rogers, came looking for me at the Global Leadership Summit with tears in her eyes, and she hugged me. And I was like, wow, what's up? And she said, Mr. McDonald, I just want to thank you because the Global Leadership Summit has really changed my life. I've been a part of the Global Leadership Summit for the last 3 years, and I'm graduating now. And this summit has prepared me to be a better individual, and I'm excited about what the future holds for me. Those type of story bring tears to my eyes also. And so this is why we do what we do. We engage organizations. Whether you be a civic organization or a corporate organization, we engage you. We engage civil society so that you could, continue to learn and become a better individual. Because when we do that, we end up with a better country.
So what type of areas, delving deeper into the type of subject matter or the areas of focus? Because me on the outside who may believe that I have already arrived or I'm a leader in my own right, I don't need any training, or I don't need to pursue further excellence in my craft or in my area, because I'm just a natural at leading people. I have that personality and I'm a natural. So what specific areas, that you delve into that makes me look and say to myself a second time, maybe you do need to, sharpen up on this area or the other.
Yeah. You said something just now that a lot of people sort of hold on to talk about their personality. Personality has very little to do with leadership. Because leadership is a craft. Leadership is something that you have to constantly work on, because what happens is the circumstances change all the time. You always have problems. You always have challenge. You have to be dealing with people. And so if people change, then you have to be ahead of that change. You can do two things. All right. You could be influenced by the change, or you could be influencing the change. What leadership and leadership development does, it challenges you to be ahead of what is happening. In other words, you could begin to anticipate what's happening, and you begin to influence it. You don't just influence it with conversation, but you influence it with conversation, but with a great level of engagement with people and with ideas. And so it means that you study ideas, you study concepts, you study people, and you're about offering solutions all the time. And really, it brings out the best of you. That means that you remain creative. I heard A.R. Bernard said this, that the voice of the people is often not the mind of the people. What leadership does is leadership flip that idea to make the voice of the people the mind of the people. So as leaders, it's important for us to be engaging. We don't believe that we're beyond people. We see the value of people. And so leaders ought to be humble, right? And humility is the idea that you could learn from anyone. Pastors can learn from politicians. Politicians can learn from pastors. We all can learn from business people. We can learn from the ordinary individual on the road. And so you ought to be humble enough to take on that posture of learning. Because if you're not, you're missing out something. And so if I meet any leader who say that they have arrived, especially as it relates to leadership, then that means that you have a challenge. We all have a problem. And whatever organization that they lead, they're not leading it to the maximum capacity.
Now, how do you even learn humility? I don't know if that's a learned behavior. I mean, instinctively, in my mind, either you're humble or you're not. I mean, isn't that a byproduct of upbringing or your temperament? How would a training, maybe you can train me to help me to be more empathetic to persons or listening to their needs. But I mean,
humility?
I just think
humility is a choice. I mean, you choose to be humble. In other words, you choose to value people. You are no better than nobody else. None of us are. And so you have to just realize and see the value in people. And once you see the value in people, you automatically, if you just believe it's about you and that the world centers around you, that the organization centers around you, then you're not humble. But when you realize that none of us, that we are an island by ourselves and that we need people and that we have to work with people, that we have to have conversations with people, then it puts you in a position of always learning. And I think that is where we need leaders to be. Always learning. And in order for you to be learning, you have to be humble. You have to see people and you have to see the value in people. And so it doesn't your position, the resources that you have in the bank, it does not make you a leader. What makes you a leader is when you engage people to take them from where they are to where they need to go. Because the truth of the matter is, Heather, is that people will do almost any what if they are given sufficient reason why. And very often we don't delve into the why. And so leadership for me, it's a learned habit. I mean, you could learn to be a leader. You could learn to be a leader. You could learn to be humble. And humility, like we said, is a simple choice. So some of the topics that we engaging at the Global Leadership Summit, let's talk about the topics that we're going to be talking about this year. Craig is going to be talking about expanding your leadership. How do you build leadership capacity, not only in yourself, but in your team, within your organization? How do you do that? Michelle Pola, she's a wonderful speaker. She's going to be talking about fear. How do you engage your fears? Because really, fear prevents you from leading out and doing the things that you know you could do. It stagnates you. It places you in a comfort zone. How do you get outside of the comfort zone? General McChrystal, he's going to be talking about how do you master the risk? What are the systems that you build in order to master risk and place your organization at the place where you can anticipate risk, but not only anticipate risk, but deal with risk and learn from risk. And so we have technicians, leadership technicians, who are going to be talking to us. Malcolm Gladwell, he's going to be talking about the urgency of a leader.
The urgency.
The urgency of a leader.
Now, if you could stick a pin right there, I think in our culture, we suffer from not treating matters generally with sufficient urgency.
Yeah.
And I think until things come upon us, or like they say, until it's all on top of your head, then you realize that certain matters need to be addressed with urgency. And we've seen, most recently, the recent elections, but not even in politics, because, I always say I don't like to talk politics, and I get excited when I get on a political track. But not just in politics, in business, at home, like I said, in the church. If leaders deal with with people's issue with a matter of urgency, I think you'd end up automatically becoming a better leader. I'm not putting off your issue until tomorrow. If you're my staff member and you come into my office with a concern, I'm not going to blow you off and deal with it next week.
Yes.
Because then, you do that too many times, you have your staff.
Confidence in you.
That's right. People lose confidence in you. Your children lose confidence in their parents. People would lose confidence in their pastors. If you keep going to your pastor and they don't have time for you because somebody else's issue is more important than yours in the moment. That's, I think, the easiest way to degrade or actually whittle down the confidence that you have in your leader. So that sounds like, that's an interesting topic.
Solution. No, it is because organizations and country miss out because we delay leadership. We delay decision. All right. And then not only do we delay, but we tend to look for perfection and we just want to pass it down the road. So there's no intentionality with resolving some of the challenges that we have. And that's why we need leaders who are in the game, all right, of learning how to lead better. And so that we can make better decisions across the board and so that we could build better teams and build better systems that will drive results. You spoke about staff coming to you and talking about the issue or a parishioner coming to you and talking about the issue and the delay. Now, we know that all leaders are busy. They're busy, but we don't have the luxury. We don't have the luxury of ignoring concerns. So if you cannot address it, your responsibility is to build the systems within your organizations where those concerns are addressed, right? Because what happens if those concerns are not addressed, what's going to happen is they don't want to follow you. And that's the same thing with national leadership. When people concerns are not addressed, they find a new government.
But
when you ignore them.
But is it a realistic expectation? I mean, and I guess I'm getting back to the word you use is systems, right? So if the system is in place, it's not unreasonable then for 100 people to want me as an individual to address their concern, because even if I can't do it, I have put in place a proper system so that there are 2, 3, 5, 100 people under me in a working system that deal with each particular concern. But I think that we haven't really done a good job figuring that out generally, because I still think everyone, or not everyone, but many, many leaders in the country still want to hold on to the responsibility of answering all of these concerns themselves. So the minute you hold on to all of the responsibility, for example, these are my constituents. You have 4,000 constituents in a constituency. Yeah. No wonder if only 300 or 400 of them have complaints, you're going to be voted out in the next election, because you decided that you're the one who's going to have to address every issue, as opposed to, like you say, learning systems, implementing these systems so that, you effectively communicate, you're managing expectations, and perhaps you don't get those persons as angry with you because they know the chain and the chain of command to follow.
And when you have an issue, when you have a problem, no one wants excuses as to why those issues and problems cannot be resolved. Everyone is looking for results. And so as leaders, we're supposed to be resolving people's issues. As a matter of fact, we're supposed to be making their lives better, whether it's an organization that you're a part of, whether you're leading a country, whether you're a member of parliament, whether you're a pastor of the church. It's your responsibility to be engaged in the idea of making things better, improving results. And when you do that, listen, people would appreciate what you're doing. Not only that, but you would gain partnership along the way. And people will be excited about keeping you as a leader, because at the end of the day, everybody's looking for results, Heather. And so it's important for us to build systems that will produce results. And I can tell you, for the most part, when the problems that people have, they have the solutions. They have the solution, but you just have to be intelligent enough, willing to listen to them long enough, and they'll tell you what their solutions are. All right? They'll tell you what the solution is. But, this is the idea of us engaging, though, is when you sit there as a leader, and especially in the political arena, believing that you have all the answers and believing that you could continue to lead without a sense of authenticity, right? Without being transparent and without being honest. And people pick that up after a while.
Yeah, you really just can't fake that for too long.
No, you can't. You can.
Now, can you learn it? Can you learn it though? See, again, that's the thing that in my mind, and you got to help me along here, because in my mind, I'm thinking that these things are just traits that you have or you don't. That's why we're always learning every day. But instinctively, how would I learn to be transparent if I'm just not that type of person?
Yeah, it's a habit that you just develop, and you get in the right environment, and that would challenge you in that particular area, would show you the benefit of being transparent, and I promise you that you will be transparent, because here's what a politician wants: they want to remain they want to remain being the representative, right? If you show them, if they understand that this is what people want, right, and when you give them what they want, right, and this is how they respond to you, they will adjust. I think for a long time, one of the things that we've done is we've held up values, values that were not in our best interest, right? They were modeled out by individuals, and we did not challenge them. We adopt them, and that is what is so amazing, especially about the political arena. It's something called the pedagogy of leadership. As long as we are in opposition, right, are not in the seat, it's easy for us to criticize. But if your learning has only been what you are observing from the person sitting in the seat right now, when you sit in that seat, what you're going to do is you're going to magnify what that person was doing, even though you criticize them. Why? Because the base from which you draw from is what they taught you. And we look at that throughout our country. And I mean, we could pick leaders from Lyndon Oscar Pinland all the way down to the present leader. And what we saw is we don't see much a walk away. We see more like what we call a doubling down on certain things, right? And that's a challenge. Why? Because one leader taught the next. Now, when they're in opposition, they'll criticize. But when they're sitting in the seat, they draw from what they have been trained. And for the truth of the matter, their exposure has only been what the previous leader exposed them to. And so for us, it's very much important for us to be about developing ourselves as leaders so that we'll have a broader scope of situation, circumstance. And so we'll be dynamic ourselves. So when circumstances change, we wouldn't be robotic. What we would do is we would respond with a level of authenticity, with a level of engagement, putting the right people around us, and having the crucial conversations that would lead out to meaningful results.
Well, on that topic, one texter just texted and said he agrees and thinks that the FNM is better in opposition, and because when they're in power, they don't know how to treat their people. I don't know. Someone else texts and says that it's easy to have mouth now when you're out in opposition, and you're a mouse when you're in the House of Assembly. So two persons out there kind of agreeing with what you're saying, but does that make, though, the individual any different or any less a leader if when they're on the outside in opposition? I mean, because you drew the distinction yourself. Basically, when you're in, you're following the leadership line and style that has been set before you, but in opposition, you have a freedom, or, I guess the you don't have to necessarily toe the same line that you have to toe once you're inside the House of Assembly. Do you think that makes the individual, though, any less authentic or any less of
No, I think it has to do with preparation. I mean, I think, and that's not me saying broad brushing circumstances. That's just a concept or leadership idea as it relates to what normally happen when leaders are not prepared to lead, and they just automatically do what they have been taught. And that is the point. That is the takeaway from this. And so what we're saying now is that leaders ought to be at the table of learning and developing and growing. You ought to be in the classroom constantly. Life. You ought. I mean, every day of your life, every year, you ought to be reading books. You ought to be attending conferences. You ought to be in broader discussion. But for the most part, most leaders are about maintaining the ordinary responsibility, the ordinary things of their business, of their organization, and they're not intentional about growing. When you look at the training and development budget of most organizations, it's very minimal. It's very minimal. So they're not trying to stretch. They believe that's not a priority, but it is. Your most precious resources is your human resources, and when you as a leader can develop your human resources, right, and develop you as a leader, that's the best investment that you can make. And that's why I tell you, at the Global Leadership Summit, we believe that everyone wins when a leader gets better. You get better by hanging around leaders, being a part of leadership discussion, being a part of conferences and seminars. And I don't mean just conferences and seminars that just talk to you, but I'm talking about conferences and seminars that take a deep dive into leadership. And everybody that we put on at the Global Leadership Summit, entire state, they are technicians. They have the body of work and results to show, right? And they can model out to you in some way, some form, how to make this happen. Because what we want people to do is to leave with application principle. That is what leadership is all about. Challenging ourselves to constantly grow and develop and become better individuals. And as we become better individuals, we lead better organization and we develop better communities and country.
So, Mr. McDonald, who really should be attending and when is it? I mean, I know I'm attending. This is going to be the first time that I've attended the Global Leadership Summit. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to hearing from the ladies. So if you permit me a minute of bias, and I'm hearing it all out there. I'm sorry, everyone, if you think I'm talking about the ladies too much, but you know this is what I'm passionate about. So I want to hear about the ladies that are coming up at the summit who I can look forward to listening to and let us know when, because I know it is on the weekend.
Yeah, it's actually on Friday and Saturday. It's a virtual Global Leadership Summit this year. Due to the pandemic, this is our second year. Hopefully, the next one is going to be face-to-face, so we're looking forward to that. It's a virtual Global Leadership. And it starts on Friday at 9 a.m., right? And on Saturday also. So we run up until 2 o'clock on Friday, and on Saturday is from 9 until 1. Like I said, let's talk about the ladies speakers that's going to be there. We have Michelle Paula. She's talking about Hello Fair. I mentioned her already. We also have Juliet Fund. She's going to be talking about a minute to think and how effective that is in organization. We also have Ubuking, who is a leader in Africa. She's held on to values, significant values over life, even from a very young age. And she's going to be talking about that is your choice. It's your choice, that no one make you do anything, that you have to choose. And it's the same thing we've been talking about. You have to choose to be a better leader. You have to choose to adopt value. One of the things that we keep saying to leaders and individuals is this: you have to become the leader of yourself. What you do in private leaks out in the public. And so many of us often believe that we could have a different private life from our public life.
That's real good there.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
lead yourself first.
Yeah. And so if you cannot, let's look at this. If you cannot keep a commitment to your wife, then most likely you won't keep a commitment. And this might sound hard, but you can't keep a commitment to your constituent, because what happened, a commitment is a commitment, right? And so you have to be careful what you model out. And so we say to leaders, listen, man, lead yourself. Be true to yourself. Be authentic to yourself, because what you do in private eventually would leak out in the public. And you know when it leaks out? When you least expect it. When you least expect it. And so most leaders, and you could tell the stories of leaders who was sort of disappointed when the things that they were doing in their private life, leaked out in their public life, right? They felt as if, we were sorry, but they were only sorry because they got caught.
Right.
Because what happens, and this is what is so interesting about leadership development, it's a closed door event. It's a closed door event. It's where you are spending time with yourself, developing yourself. Most leaders, they desire to be on the platform, right? But they do not do any work
To govern their own self or lead.
actually, or to develop their leadership in private. It's very much important for us to be reading the books in private when nobody is watching. It's very much important for us to be a part of leadership development when nobody is watching. So when you show up on the stage, you deliver. You deliver. And people, oftentimes, people who haven't seen me for years, and then they began to talk to me, or they would see me, they would recognize, they would look at me and say, God, boy, you've changed, right? And I say, there's an intentionality to this whole thing. What you listen to, where you hang out, it informs who you become, right? And I tell people all along, you show me the books you're reading, and you show me the people that you're listening to, who's speaking to you, right? Who's getting into your air gates, and I'll tell you where you're headed. Daddy used to say, birds of a feather flock together.
You were right in my mind.
And
I was
they all
thinking
gone
about
to the
chickens.
same place.
I was just thinking
All
about
go to the
chickens and
same
eagles. They said if you hang out with chickens and all of that good stuff. So we on the same wavelength talking about birds and birds of a feather. But
yeah. So the summit is going to be phenomenal. It's going to be an in-your-face event. Richard is going to talk about ownership, inspiration, and impact. Rich Wilkinson Jr., he's going to be talking about the grind of leadership, how it's a daily grind. It's not a watch it happen. It's about getting in there and doing the work. Chris McChesney said that many people can strategize, can come up with a big plan, but few people can execute. Yeah. And this execution is where the character and the strength of leadership comes in, or where you look at situation and you drive results. We all know the story about Steve Jobs and I think it was Xerox, and how Xerox was holding on to this technology and wouldn't release it in the development of the computer, the interface. And they invited Jobs down, and Jobs was asking them, why, what's up? Why y'all ain't release this lad? He was so excited. He said, no, the world ain't ready for it. Jobs break off running from there and went back to his lab and said, listen, we're starting everything over. I just came from the future. And we're going to scrap what we're doing. But the guys look at him and say, listen, man, you just spend millions of dollars. What you trying to do? He said, no. The future is where we headed. The future is where he invested everything. And now everybody knows about Apple.
Everybody knows about him.
And nobody knows about Xerox any longer, hardly.
That's something now. You have a boom. And I guess it happens in industry. It happens in politics. It happens in the church. Yeah. We have this burst of success. Mm-hmm. And then for some reason, leaders may, just don't maintain. Yeah. I guess that's another strategy or another aspect that leaders need to be paying attention to, how to just get to the top but actually maintain and not fizzle out, because I'm sure that is also a strategy and a technique that needs to be explored.
Heather, you said something very interesting. Our country is at a very interesting place. It's at a place where we need technicians to be about developing our country. We need people with will. We need people with grit, with a level of understanding, with great leadership acumen, who can take us to where we need to go. And I think the conversation has to change. What we talk about as a country has to change, because we have a lot of opportunities. Oftentimes we look out rather than looking within. And I think we have leaders across the length and breadth of our country. It's now time for leaders to make sure that the voice of the people is actually the mind of the people. We have brilliant individuals in our country, and it's going to take leadership to engage with them and to partner up with them to drive the results that we need to obtain in our country.
Do you think, though, that, I guess you use the word gaps, but where you see gaps or deficiencies, across the, leadership spectrum, in various sectors in the country, is it something to do with age and not being connected to generations behind? Or in your experience, it just may be, it's more of the not being as willing to train and submit and recognize that you do need to just learn and be trained on leadership principles and not just rely on your strong personality?
No, and that's true. Personality don't drive much, to be honest with you. Principle does. And you have to find what systems drive results and implement them. You have to find what principle work and apply them. And very often we try to lead with personality, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work. After a while, you get into personal conflicts with individuals. You get into the like and the dislike of individuals, and it has nothing to do with driving meaningful results. Listen, we're a melting pot. I mean, we have multiple generations that are still involved in the space, the productivity space, right? People, you would have parents or grandparents still in the productivity space. You have their children in the productivity space. You have their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren in the productivity space. And we have to learn to navigate. And how do we learn to navigate? Is by listening and engaging across demographics. All right? That calls for a real level of authentic engagement and deep dives and meaningful conversation. We've got a big country to develop, and whether you lead out an organization, if you're not developing as a leader, that organization is going to die. if you're leading a country and you're not intentional about your overall development, that country is not going to meet its maximum capacity. And you know what is so amazing is that people are going to come in and they're going to see it and they're going to take advantage of it. And that's why we ought to be intentional with the next steps that we take as a country. You know, I want to just drop some numbers here, Heather. If you're interested in being a part of the Global Leadership Summit, you could go on glsbahamas.com. That's glsbahamas.com, or you can call 423-0412. That's 423-0412 or 376-0064.
And just before we leave this afternoon, why or who? I think that's the better way to put it. Persons who are not in any leadership post, persons who are not a supervisor, not a manager, not in political office, not the head of any congregation. Why would leadership even be a topic of conversation for someone like that?
Well, because all of us are leaders, and every last one of us have influence. Every last one of us have influence, and you can expand your influence. You expand your influence by improving your leadership, because people don't put you in leadership position in terms of leading an organization if you have nothing to contribute. They put you there when you do have something to contribute. And like I said, this is a learned habit. This is about an adoption, and you can morph into somebody better. And so I'm saying to you, all of us are leaders, and every last one of us have influence, and we ought to leverage those influence. And you ought to come to a place that's going to teach you how you can leverage those influence and improve upon your overall leadership.
Yes, and I think not rely on your charm and your personality.
It doesn't work. It fades away.
I think we are victims of that. I think 40-something or almost 50 years post-independence, we in the Bahamas are now victims, and it's sad to say, but we are victims of the personality fad.
Absolutely.
We want the one who's going to get up there and rile us up and make us feel good and yeah. And of course, that doesn't mean that those charismatic leaders did not have the requisite leadership skills, because obviously they did, because they took us from
they were visionary.
Yes,
they were visionary.
They took us from one place to the next. But I think what we need to be doing, what I think I am doing in my personal reflection time, is just saying, I don't really need to be looking at your personality. I need to be looking at substance. What are you delivering?
Yeah.
What have you done? Like you said, have you been able to be a good leader in your own right, in your own personal life? I mean, if you can't run your house, how you can run, something else?
And what's your compelling vision for this country? What's your compelling vision for your community? What's your compelling vision for all of us? And how do we collaborate to make it happen? Because if you're not leaving space around the table for me, then I'm not really interested in your leadership, because I understand that there's limits to your leadership. But when all of us come together, then we could do something phenomenal, right? We leverage your strength and we leverage my strength and everybody else's strength. We focus on things that unite us, not things that divide us, and we focus on the grander vision for our country. We could do some phenomenal things. So personality, I'm not interested in it. And I don't think any one of us can say that a country, that an organization, that a community has been developed based on personality.
Yes. Well, I can't wait to attend the Global Leadership Summit. It's going to be my first time, although it's been in the Bahamas for more than 8 years, and of course around the world for more than 20 years in more than 123 countries. So I just want to thank you, Mr. McDonald, for operating in that space, in bringing a little bit more awareness to what it is that you do, what your organization does, helping to train and bring up the next generation of leaders. Because if we're not thinking about the next generation of leaders, I think we're robbing the next generation.
Absolutely.
So I'm just so glad that you're operating in this space, and I want you to continue to keep doing the stellar job that you are doing. It's been my pleasure to be with you, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Hit Back on this wonderful Wednesday. I will be back next week. I want you to tune in, because I know some of you may not like it, but next week is International Women's Day. So I'm back on the women's topic next week, Wednesday. The woman down, yes. So join me next week, and I'll see you then. Thanks for having me today.
Every man, every woman, every boy, every girl, rise up and take a stand. Represent change.